Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are checking out this video. First of all, thank you for watching the video. I am Randall Colson. I am a grad student at Robert Morris University, and I'm presenting to you guys my master's thesis titled Youth and Leadership Disconnect. I'll be honest with you guys, the reasons why I really wanted to study this topic is because kind of what's going on with my life right now. I feel like that's what everybody does. But right now I am a youth minister and a substitute teacher. But in the next actual weeks, depending on graduation, which I hope I graduate, but depending on graduation, I will be transitioning from youth minister to associate minister as our church is now going through a transition period and we're trying to get ready. Basically, towards the end of this, I'm going to be stepping up in leadership and taking on a more difficult role and a bigger leadership role. But it's one of those things where it's what's needed to be done at our church, but I have a heart for the youth and I want to stay connected as much as possible. And I was a little bit fearful because I heard a lot of people talk about how the higher and higher you get into leadership, the less and less you stay connected with the youth because more of the decisions that you have to make. So I wanted to actually do research on that and see if that's actually true, if we can prevent that from happening, if I can maybe find the keys or the tools to stay connected with youth. I really wanted to make sure that I could stay connected. I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what I needed to do, things or pitfalls I had to avoid so that I can be an effective leader, but also still stay connected to the youth. So my big two research questions were: number one, what factors promote connections with youth? Number two, what characteristics of leaders make the most significant impact on youth? I really wanted to, again, find these pitfalls, find these keys, find the tools that I would need to be able to be successful as I progress in my career. So before I did anything, we had to go with the literature review. And I split the literature review into a couple of different sections. One of the biggest sections was leadership. Obviously, when you're talking about leadership and disconnect, you got to start with leadership. And that was more of a basis, a cover of traditional leaderships like servant leader, transformational leadership, just different things like that. But I think the biggest key that I found was here in this point where it says youth have a strong focus on being more involved in the community, social inequity, and developing social skills. And it says that youth definition of leadership doesn't match adults' definition. And what I found within this research was that a lot of times adults, we have it clear cut. This is what we want in a leader. We want a leader who stands above the crowd, who can lead the charge, things like that. But as I've read more and more in the literature review, I found that there's a lot of different definitions for leadership when it comes to youth. A lot of youth see leaders as someone who's willing to be a servant, someone who is willing to get involved in the community. And so it's really important to understand, if we're trying to stay connected with youth, how they see leadership. And it may not match up with how my generation sees it or an older generation. So that was really important. Number two, we talked about, or I learned about disconnected youth, which this statistic was super important. I'm going to read it to you right now. A staggering 2.8 million young people, 10% of youth and young adults between the ages of 16 and 24 are neither in school nor working, placing them at high risk of subsequent economic and social hardship. So if you really think about that, or 200.8 young people are not involved in either that's higher education or they're not working, because we know that college is not always the answer for everyone, but they're just out there living life from the ages of 16 to 24, 2.8 million people. Think about that. That's kind of crazy, but that's the generation that we're leading, or that's the generation that we're in, and they're that disconnected. We're doing something wrong. We aren't focusing on what their needs are, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in a minute. But then the next point that I researched was the need for engaged youth. I feel like that quote enough. If you don't know the importance of the need for engaged youth, where are you living at? What are you doing? Because the youth are the future. That 2.8 million those are people that we're going to need, that need to contribute in society. These may be the future leaders, maybe the president of the United States. Just there's so much potential in youth. You never know what they're going to end up being later on. And I think sometimes in leadership, we try to think about the now. But again, as my study, I want to not only think about the now, but think about the future as well. And I think in leadership, it gets hard to do that. But the youth are the future, so they should always be a priority. The next point that I said was the next point that I studied was how to lead the youth. It says, to effectively lead youth, there needs to be a focus on positive psychology. Youth need to be seen not as a burden or a problem, but more as a research that needs to be utilized. And this is something that I focused on during my questions, I'm skipping steps, but the youth need to be looked at as utilized. And we cover a lot of that later on in the PowerPoint and in my research paper. But a lot of times we think of youth or little kids as annoying, or, oh, they're in the way, let me do it. A lot of older people are like, just move out the way, let me do it. No, these youth are tools, they're people, and not that they're tools, but they need to be utilized. They are tools. They're special tools, and we need to utilize them, and they are the key to the future, like I said. And also, they bring something to the table. So we need to always think of that when we're dealing with youth. As the literature review continues, another point that I found was how to connect to or with youth. And the simple answer is creating multiple pathways for success is the right approach needed to connect the youth. Now, this is something that I think needs to be addressed more. A lot of times in our society, we make it seem like it's a one and done type situation, like there's a cookie cutter, everybody fits the perfect mold. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're losing a lot of kids, or not that I think, that is one of the reasons why we're losing a lot of children or youth, is because they don't fit the mold, and the mold may not be essentially what's best for them. Each child is an individual. Each child is different. And so we need to make sure that we're providing multiple pathways for success. College may not be the answer, but that doesn't mean that you can't contribute to society if you don't go to college. Listen, a lot of us know that when you go to college, you get a lot of loans, and there's other avenues. You can go trade school route, and we'll talk about that a little bit, or that's what's talked about in the research as well. Trade schools are a valuable option. So that needs to be presented to youth as much as possible. Reconnection. Besides providing students with academic knowledge, the school needs to play an essential role in transitioning from youth to adulthood by connecting the information between education and work experiences. So this is what I would simply say, just application. A lot of the information that's given to students is all head knowledge, and it takes time and a lot of energy for students and youth to figure out, what does all this mean? How does this affect my life? I deal with this a lot when I'm preaching, dealing with youth ministry. The Bible that I talk about is great, but it's just words on a page. It needs to be connected to their life. There needs to be an application. Same thing with school and other opportunities. We can't just give them information. This has to be connected. They need to be able to apply it to their lives. And then lastly, lead the youth to be leaders. The development starts with self-understanding and self-reflection. These traits are vital for effective leadership. So teaching students to be self-aware, that is a big thing that is hard to do, but the more and more we can teach youth how to be self-aware, how to get control with their emotions, how to understand situations, how to look at other people and see and decide what the right move to do or right action to take is. That is crucial when we're talking about raising youth to be leaders. They need to understand who they are, what they're about, what their skills are, what their talents are. My research methodology is really simple. I interviewed pastors and principals. You would think that these are two totally different occupations, but I found when we're talking about leadership, especially when dealing with youth, these are two of the most connected occupations, I could say. There are other ones, but these are two of the best occupations I could think of that would give some great results based off these qualitative interviews, which is, again, the procedure that I chose to take really. And I did semi-structured interviews because I wanted the information that was gathered throughout the interviews to be able to be stored into themes. And as you guys will see in the next slide, we developed actually a lot of different themes through these semi-structured interviews. So let's go over those themes real quick. So there were 5 themes that were identified. They were authenticity, personal relationships, listening, provide opportunities, and being intentional. So what I did is I took my favorite quotes from the interviews and we'll kind of talk about what was talked about within the interviews. So the first quote, or the first theme and the best quote I think that fit with that theme, was authenticity. And participant 8 said, youth do pick up on your character. That is important that they know that you respect them and you can keep the confidence and have their true perspective in your heart. That goes a long way. So what this person was talking about was that the youth pick up on who you are. A lot of, actually all 8 of the participants all talked about being authentic, being real, showing where they messed up, where they're not perfect, and honestly, again, caring about the person, but not making it in such a, I guess you can say, an inauthentic way. It wants to be an authentic, genuine care. You want the students to know that you care about them. But this participant was basically just saying, like, youth can pick up on that. They know, they judge based off of your character. If you have a good character, they will more than likely see you as a trusted leader, and that again will help you with your connection process with them. Number 2, the next theme is personal relationships. Participant 6 said, if a person were not able to build a relationship with the youth, all the person would be doing is transferring information. Then they wouldn't be transforming lives. And this kind of correlates with what I was talking about before, about how there needs to be an application, and that it can't just be head knowledge, and we can't just be giving students and youth just information on information. It does not work. There needs to be a personal relationship that's involved. There needs to be some application that's involved so that students can take that information and grow from it, honestly, and become leaders themselves. So personal relationships was another one. All 8 of the participants talked about this as well. The next one was listening. Another one all 8 of the participants talked about. Participant 5 said, listening to their needs, troubles, fears, apprehension, and concerns about their thoughts of today and thoughts of tomorrow. Another participant said, everybody wants to be heard. Everyone wants someone to listen to them. And that was just a theme that all 8 of the participants kept saying. You have to listen to youth. Even if you don't agree with what they're talking about, or you may not connect, sometimes all it is that listening ear, just lending them an ear to bounce ideas off of. They come up with the answers themselves. So listening is a crucial part of connecting with youth and always having that connection with youth. The next 2 themes that we're continuing with, the 5 themes. The first one is provide opportunities. Participant 4 said, as a leader, I find I'm more successful when I can admit when I'm wrong and lead without doing everything. I don't need to be dragging people along. There are times when youth need to be in front and lead me, and I have to make sure I provide a time and a place for that to happen. That's a big statement, but it's great. Providing opportunities. A lot of times, like I said before, adults, leaders, we look at other youth or just other people sometimes as a nuisance or a problem, and we underutilize a lot of people because we're like, oh, I just got to get this done. And what this participant was basically saying was like, I need to get out the way and provide them with opportunities. Now, this was discussed by 5 of the participants, talking about getting them in the right position to lead, getting them in the right position to be connected. If you really think about some of the disconnected youth in your life, if you think about them right now, it's probably because they didn't have a place where they could connect to. They didn't have a place where they fit in, where their talents were being used or utilized. So really, again, providing opportunities. As a leader, how can we present youth with opportunities to not only explore their leadership, but again, contribute to whatever the organization is or whatever the problem is? How can they contribute to the solution? And then lastly, the last theme was being intentional. Participant 3 said, we always have to keep the youth in our front view mirror and say youth are first. So we always have the student perspective in mind and the student voice in mind so that they are the focus for everything we do. I think that is the key. I think 7 out of the 8 participants all agreed that being intentional was super important. A lot of it, when it comes to leadership, yes, you are going to be bogged down with maybe some paperwork or the busy work or things that may take you away from dealing with youth and interacting with youth. But majority of the participants all agreed that you have to be intentional with however you're going to interact with youth, however you're going to make decisions that will best impact them. You have to make the effort to do it. You have to try your absolute hardest because the job will pull you in the opposite direction. And that, again, that was another key that I was really looking for, that there really is no secret besides you got to try your hardest and be intentional. So those were the 5 themes that were discovered. And I wanted to just cover the result findings. Now, number 1, my result finding was leaders must have personal relationships with the youth they oversee to create personal connections. A leader must be authentic and, most importantly, listen. Leaders must be intentional and provide opportunities for youth to lead and nurture their leadership skills. Based off of all the interviews that I came across, and they were long, but I was able to dissect them all. And these are the biggest things that I found. To be a successful leader, you got to have personal relationships. You have to be authentic and you have to listen. And then if you want your youth to stay connected and you want them to grow, you got to provide them with opportunities so that they can in turn become leaders as well. So it's really leaders, turning leaders into leaders. And that is something that I think we think happens automatically, that leaders are just born. Well, no, we know that leaders are made. So I thank you for listening to or watching this video. I hope it summed up my master's thesis. And if you have any questions, here's my contact information. But I hope you have a blessed day, and I thank you for watching.